My name is Cheryl Erickson, and I am the Indigenous focused ECE instructor with Louis Riel Vocational College. Today in guidance, we're going to look at Chapter 13 and discuss some diverse needs and how we can use some guidance approaches regarding that. Just a reminder though, before we start Chapter 13, please do read this chapter, as this video is not a replacement for your chapter readings. So one of the biggest issues regarding diversity and respecting diversity is that each child is a unique individual and each family is unique as well. So in order to really guide and be respectful, you have to appreciate these differences and make adjustments within your program to meet the needs of all children and all families. So when we look at disruptive behaviors, what is typically a disruptive behavior that children display, or disruptive behaviors that you might see in a childcare setting? And that could be just non-compliance, inattention, aggression, temper tantrums are the most common. And usually over time, children develop the social skills and these behaviors are corrected. So what is essentially happening is maybe the children haven't mastered these types of skills developmentally. Maybe they have some unmet needs and we work with them, problem solve and appropriately guide, and the children learn to develop those skills. Some children, however, will need some additional supports, and maybe that is an additional staff that might come into your program to help support a child or a group of children. And it just, we work in partnership with additional support staff to meet the needs of the children. So we do want to, have a consistent, well-established program and process on how we're going to use different approaches, different strategies, perhaps, to help prevent certain behaviors. So prevention strategies typically will help 85% of children learn appropriate social skills and be successful in an early learning environment. And this is basically, when you look at a percentage, it's 17 children out of 20 will be successful in developing appropriate social skills. And that in intentional instruction will be about 2 children out of 20 will need that one-on-one type of instruction to help them be a little bit more successful. As well as if an intense one-on-one with peers in a class, one child typically out of 20 may need some more concrete support. So there are, variances within those strategies and those processes. And again, it's going to be a lot of observing and trying to understand why those behaviors are taking place. We want to look at building meaningful relationships as part of prevention. Again, that speaks to attachment, safety, security, and why those relationships are important. Children learn that we care about them, are going to want to please us more, and that process takes place. We need to understand where the child is developmentally, and that really speaks to what kind of strategies we'll use. Developmentally, if it's temper tantrums, that is pretty age appropriate for a 2-year-old. So we're gonna, give them time and help them work through those situations. Looking at how our environment is set up, is it stimulating enough for the children that need some challenges? Does it have enough materials for younger children so that they are successful? We really want to look at that as a prevention strategy too. And that our curriculum is engaging enough, that it's focusing around things that the children are interested, that it's natural as well. So we really want to incorporate all those as good prevention types of strategies. Intentional types of instructions and teaching, we're looking at intentional as being teaching, the larger group. And so in that intentional teaching, not only are we maybe trying to address the needs of 1 or 2 children, those 3, 17 out of 20, it's still a meaningful type of activity for all of the children. So, it might be something geared to social skills, success in the classroom, a puppet story, a story, something like that teaches specific skills. And in the situations where maybe we're looking at additional support and more individualized goals, that is those individual instructions. So we have realized that maybe the behavior that a child is having is more than we're able to manage. We've consulted some specialists. Maybe there's a behavioral specialist that's come into play to help the child. And we're trying some different approaches and different strategies, working with different agencies to guide us in teaching that child more effective ways to manage behavior. So again, it's teaching, could be unlearning behaviors, teaching replacement behaviors. You see a lot of this not only with behavior problems, but if you're having children with additional needs such as autism or global delays and things like that, you're going to have individual instructions specific to a child and what their individual plan is. So always remember that we shouldn't put labels on anybody. When we look at any child with a behavior problem or an additional need such as autism, whatever type of disability there might be, we want to make sure that it's we rephrase it and it's a child with autism, not an autistic child. So it's always going to be the child first. We're always going to deal with or interact with the child, and then we will manage those behaviors. We'll have those goals or skills that we're going to be developing with our team that's going to help meet the needs of that particular child. So always the child first language is something that's really important when dealing with children. Childhood behaviors that teachers find problematic. And so these are just some, I guess, typical behaviors that children may display. The off-task behavior is more associated with school behaviors. Off-task, you don't always, it isn't always a cause of concern in a preschool program, just simply because children have more choice in that preschool environment, and so typically they're choosing things that they want to play with. And so therefore, they're more readily to play there longer. Non-compliance and defiance. So when you're asking a child to follow a set of instructions, there's refusal and they're not wanting to do it. This could be very problematic in a child care center, and as well as aggression. So hurtful behaviors towards other people can be a very problematic issue because we can't allow children to hurt other children. So we're going to want to develop some strategies to change those behaviors quickly and implement a process where we're giving children words to verbalize their feelings opposed to lashing out. We really do want children, despite whatever type of developmental stage they're in, or if there's a disability. We really want children to develop friendships, because friendships are really, really important. Typically, children who have a lot of difficulties don't have a lot of friends, so they haven't grasped that understanding of what it's like to want to play with someone, to develop a relationship with a peer, and feel that joy that comes, and the fun that comes out of that situation. So without friends, those behaviors typically tend to get worse as well. So helping children to learn the names of the other children in the environment is really good. Learning songs, learning games, and really scaffolding the development of some friendships is going to be really important, because once they find a connection with another child and they develop that friendship, it's going to start to be really, really important to that child, and often some policing takes place within that. They realize quickly that when they behave in a certain way, that their friend does not want to play with them, so there is a little bit of rejection. So they start to really develop appropriate social skills because they don't want to be rejected by their friends. It's really also important when we're talking about guidance and discipline that we involve the families within that. Families have a lot of insight and knowledge about their children, and maybe why their children are acting the way that they are, as well as when you have situations with non-compliance and maybe aggression. You want to let parents know that this is a challenge, and get their insight on, is it a challenge at home, and what kinds of strategies do you use at home? Because it's really good if we can come to an agreement on how we're going to effectively approach this in the daycare and home so that it is consistent. So setting up some goals is really important, and working together to help deter those type of behaviors as well. Building on the strengths as well is really important. So if the children love computers at home, is there something within the daycare environment that you can do that could be implemented at the daycare as well? And that may be part of why the child is behaving the way they are, because they really that's a really important practice for them, is a bit of screen time. And maybe that bit of screen time and that technology is something that'll reset. And it's also something you could use as consequences as well. So maybe that will help change some behavior, because if they're behaving in a way, that's something you can take away. The overall goal for that child is to self-govern their behaviors, to know what is appropriate and what is not appropriate as well. And so you want them to be able to self-regulate and learn that sense of what's right and wrong. Teaming and consulting specialists in your program, I guess you have to really work together with your teammates, the other ECEs, and your director to know when, through your observation and behaviors that are occurring, when you need some additional support. So when you need to reach out and approach a consultant. Before you can approach a consultant, you're going to have to really make sure you have a lot of documentation to support the challenging behavior, because that's something that they're going to want to see. That's something that in Manitoba Early Learning and Childcare you need for that referral process. So really make sure that you are documenting. It can be hard to meet the needs of children when it's persistent behavior problems. And when I say meet the needs of the children, you're having a hard time meeting the needs of the child that's having the behavior problem. And often we consult specialists because the behavior problems are taking away from your ability to care for the other children, or ability to be there for the other children and plan in that program. So you want to make sure you're still meeting the needs of all the children. Behavioral behavioral supports are really good for you. They give you some insight knowledge. It's a different perspective. They've worked with a lot of different children and behavior, so they can give you some good strategies, help you set some goals for a child as well. Cultural awareness, again, is always very important. Learning to communicate, especially if English is not the first language. A lot of behaviors come out of the inability to communicate and understand about a child, and the child not being able to communicate and really understand about you. So incorporating not only, figuring out maybe some different types of words you can say in a child's language to help communicate, but also body language can often work to your advantage. Close proximity to others as well, especially depending on what the behaviors are. You could be there to, to help diffuse situations. Eye contacts, greetings, and departures can all vary by culture. So really knowing what is specific to individual cultures. Watch how families relate to watch how children relate to their families and peers in cultures can really teach you about that particular child. And maybe things that you're doing is things that approaches that they don't use in their culture, and that could be a problem within your environment. And ask families, because they know their child best, so they could be a good support to you. So when you're asking families about their child, listen to them. It should be a priority. They know their children best. They have the insights on, why the child may be behaving the way they are, and that helps us understand the behavior. And learn about parents' goals. I've said that in the past. You want to make sure your goals are aligned as well for success. If you have completely different goals for children, that could be quite challenging. It could give children some really mixed messages, and it could create some behaviors as well. So you should always, prior to a child entering your facility, sit down with the parents and go over your parent policies and show them what your goals are for the children, because maybe it isn't what they're looking for in terms of care. So you want to have, be open and upfront about that, and make sure that it is the facility that's the right choice for that particular family. So that does conclude Chapter 13 in guidance. Please do see your instructor if you have any questions, as well as check in to ensure you haven't missed any handouts or assignments pertaining to Chapter 13.